All right. Want to feel more confident in your everyday English conversations? It can be kind of tricky sometimes, right?
You wish you had a cheat sheet or something.
Yeah. And that's kind of what we're doing in this deep dive. Using these conversation scripts, we're going to break down 6 common scenarios.
Greetings, asking for help, giving thanks, directions, making plans, and saying goodbye. The basics.
Exactly. We're building a toolbox of go-to phrases.
So you can feel ready to tackle anything. It's like having a secret weapon, almost.
Yeah. And once you get the why behind these phrases,
You can adapt them to fit any situation.
perfect. So first up, greetings. We all know, hi, how are you? But even something that simple can feel awkward sometimes. Like, when is it okay to say, hey, what's up?
And when should you stick with something more formal, like, hello, how are you doing?
Right. It's like, how do you get the right vibe?
Greetings are about way more than just being polite, They set the tone for the whole interaction.
Imagine walking into a job interview and saying, hey, dude.
Probably not the best first impression, huh?
Yeah, no, definitely not. So how do you figure out the right level of formality?
It all comes down to context. Think about your relationship with the person and the environment you're in.
Okay, so if it's a good friend at a party.
A casual hey works great.
Yeah.
But if you're meeting your new boss at work,
Better to stick with something a little more professional.
Yeah.
Makes total sense.
it's like choosing the right outfit for different occasions.
Speaking of navigating social situations, what about asking for help? I feel like I'm always needing to ask for help. But I worry about sounding rude.
Or pushy.
Exactly.
Here's the thing, though. Most people are actually happy to help. If you ask the right way, the key is to be polite, and to make it easy for them to say yes.
So instead of just blurting out, where is the bathroom when I'm lost in a museum?
Yeah, exactly. Instead, try something like, excuse me, could you please point me toward the restrooms?
Oh, okay.
Just adding that, excuse me.
We respect for their time.
Right. And being specific about what you need makes it easier for them to help you.
I never really thought about it that way, but I bet that subtle shift makes a huge difference. I remember this one time. I was in a new city, totally lost, and I basically just stopped someone on the street and blurted out, train station. They looked at me like I was crazy and then pointed in the right direction. But I felt so awkward.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Now I realize that if I had just phrased it more politely,
it probably would have been a much smoother interaction for both of you.
Right. So politeness is key when asking for help, which makes me think we should talk about how to express thanks.
Oh, absolutely. Saying thank you is important, but it's about more than just those words. It's about sincerity, and it's about understanding those subtle cultural differences we talked about before.
Yeah, how does culture play into expressing thanks?
Well, different cultures have different ways of showing gratitude. Some value directness, while others prefer a more indirect approach. In some cultures, a simple thank you is enough. But in others, you might need to express your thanks in a more elaborate way to really show how much you appreciate it.
Fascinating. And it makes sense.
If you don't understand those nuances.
It could lead to some pretty awkward situations. Imagine someone thinking you're rude because you didn't say thank you enough times or something.
Yeah, it happens. It's important to be mindful of those differences, especially when you're talking with people from different backgrounds.
This is so interesting. I'm starting to realize just how much thought goes into even the simplest conversations. It's not just about the words themselves.
It's about understanding those unspoken rules of communication.
Right.
And that's what makes language so fascinating. There's always more to learn, and every interaction is a chance to practice those skills.
All right, let's get back to our toolbox of English phrases. We've covered greetings, asking for help, and saying thanks. What's next?
How about directions? Nobody likes getting lost, especially in a new place.
Oh, tell me about it. I have the worst sense of direction. Like one time in London,
What happened?
I spent like an hour wandering around trying to find this restaurant. I kept asking people, where is this restaurant? but no one seemed to understand me.
Oh no.
Later, I realized I had the street name wrong. It was so embarrassing.
That's a perfect example of why clear communication is so important when you're asking for directions. You got to be specific.
So instead of just, where's the train station?
Right. Give them more details like, excuse me, could you tell me how to get to the central train station on Main Street?
Ah, I see.
Street names, landmarks, even if you can point to it on a map.
That makes a lot of sense. Thinking back to my London disaster, I probably could have saved myself a ton of time if I just asked for directions more clearly. It's like you have to anticipate what information they need to help you.
Right. It's almost like you're a detective gathering clues to solve the mystery.
Uh-huh. I like that.
But you know what? Even when you're trying your best to be clear, sometimes there can still be misunderstandings. That's where nonverbal communication can come in handy.
Nonverbal communication, like hand gestures and stuff.
Exactly. Pointing in a direction, maybe drawing a quick map in the air, even using facial expressions to show you're confused, it can really help bridge that communication gap.
Wow, I never thought about how much we communicate without actually saying anything. It's like a whole other language.
It is. It's something we do naturally in face-to-face conversations. But even on the phone, you can use your tone of voice to get your meaning across and to double check that you understand. Like, okay, so if I walk 2 blocks north, then turn left, the post office will be on my right. Is that correct?
Oh, that's a great tip. So you're basically confirming the directions back to them.
Right.
That way you know you got it right, and it shows them that you're really listening.
And that you appreciate their help.
Exactly. Okay, so we've got directions down. What about making plans? That's another one I find tricky in English.
Making plans is all about collaboration. Finding a time and an activity that works for everybody.
I'll admit, I'm not always the best at that. I tend to be pretty direct, like we're doing this at this time, but sometimes a softer approach is better.
Being direct can be great for clarity, sure. But remember those phrases like, do you want to? Or how about? Those open-ended questions make the other person feel like they're part of the decision-making process.
Ah, okay. So instead of, let's grab coffee tomorrow at 3 p.m.,
which can sound a bit like a command almost.
Yeah.
Hey, would you be free to grab coffee sometime tomorrow afternoon?
Much better. That gives them a chance to suggest a different time or even a different activity if they want.
Exactly. You're building the plan together instead of just telling them what's happening.
I like that. Speaking of different ways to phrase things, I've noticed English has so many different words for making plans, catch up, hang out, get together.
Yeah, English has a lot of nuanced vocabulary. And the words you choose often depend on the situation and how well you know the person. With close friends, you might use more casual language or slang. But in a professional context, it's better to stick with more standard English.
So it all comes back to context, right? It's not just memorizing phrases, it's understanding the why behind them.
And being able to adapt your language to fit the situation.
Exactly. This deep dive has been so eye-opening. It's like all these little subtleties I never noticed before.
And that understanding comes from practice, and exposure. The more you interact with native speakers, the more you'll pick up on those subtle cues and start to use them naturally yourself.
It's like learning to dance. At first, you're concentrating on each individual step, but eventually you start to feel the rhythm and you can move with confidence.
And that's when language learning becomes truly enjoyable. It's not just following rules anymore. It's about expressing yourself and connecting with others in a genuine way.
So we've pretty much filled up our conversational toolbox. We've got phrases for greetings, asking for help, expressing thanks, directions, making plans, and saying goodbye.
But those are just the beginning, really.
Yeah, they're like those training wheels you use when you're first learning how to ride a bike.
Exactly. You use them for a while to get comfortable and then
you ditch them and take off.
And that's what I love about language learning. There's always more to learn, Always room to grow.
All right, but let's be practical for a second. What are some other everyday conversations we might find ourselves in? Things we haven't really talked about yet.
Just think about your daily routine. What kind of interactions do you have? Do you ever need to order food at a restaurant? Or ask for clarification during a work meeting, maybe?
Oh, or what about if you want to compliment someone on their new shoes?
Exactly. All these little interactions are chances to practice your English and to build your confidence.
I love that idea. It's like turning everyday life into a language learning game.
Here's a challenge for you. Think of one of those everyday situations we haven't talked about yet.
Okay, got it.
Now, brainstorm 3 different ways to say what you want to say. Think about the level of formality, remember to be polite, and consider the context,
Yeah. Okay.
You're basically creating your own personalized phrase book.
That's a cool idea. And the more I do it,
The easier it'll become.
yeah, it's like I'm training my brain to think in English instead of just translating from my native language all the time.
And that's when you'll really start to see a difference in your fluency and in your confidence. It's like unlocking a whole new level.
That aha moment when you realize you can ride a bike without even thinking about it.
Exactly. And, maybe this deep dive has made you curious about other parts of the English language too.
Like what?
Slang, idioms, accents, all that fun stuff. There's so much to explore.
So, on that note, we've come to the end of our deep dive into daily English conversations. We've given you some go-to phrases and challenged you to come up with your own, and hopefully we've inspired you to keep on learning.
Remember, every conversation is a chance to practice and to grow. So get out there and talk to people. And most importantly, have fun with it.